there is a sound the human ear was built to catch before any other. Not a scream, not a roar, a snap. A single twig breaking somewhere behind you, in the dark, when you believed you were alone. For most of our history, that sound decided who got to have children and who did not. We like to imagine our ancestors as hunters, spear in hand, fire at their back, masters of the landscape. But for millions of years, long before any of that, they were something far more vulnerable. They were prey. And the evidence for it isn't buried in myth or guesswork. It's carved, quite literally, into bone. In 1924, a quarry worker in South Africa handed a skull to an anatomist named Raymond Dart. It belonged to a child, roughly 3 years old, who had died over 2 million years before either of them was born. Dart called it the Taung Child, and it became one of the most famous fossils in the story of human origins. For decades, scientists debated what killed it. The answer, when it finally came, was not what anyone expected. Picture the scene as it might actually have happened. A small hominin child, barely old enough to walk far from its mother, wanders near the edge of a clearing. Above, something is already circling, patient and silent on rising air. There is no growl to warn of it, no footstep, just a shadow crossing the grass, and then nothing at all. When researchers examined the Taung skull closely, they found puncture marks in the eye sockets, the precise spaced pattern left by the talons of a large bird of prey. Not a lion, not a leopard. The sky itself had been a hunting ground, and our ancestors hadn't even known to look up. That alone should unsettle you. But it gets stranger, because the eagle was not the only predator that had learned to read early humans like a menu. In caves across southern Africa, Sterkfontein, Swartkrans, Kromdraai, a paleontologist named C.K. Brain spent years sorting through thousands of bone fragments, trying to answer a deceptively simple question. Were these caves the homes of our ancestors or their graves? His conclusion, published in the landmark study, The Hunters or the Hunted, reshaped the field. Many of the hominin bones bore tooth marks matching not humans, but leopards. The spacing of canine punctures on a Swartkrans skull lined up almost perfectly with a leopard's lower jaw, still on display beside the fossil itself. Our ancestors weren't dragging carcasses into these caves. Leopards were dragging them. So here is the picture that emerges, and it is nothing like the confident, spear-wielding image we grew up with. Early hominins lived under near constant threat from above, from the grass, from the dark mouth of every cave and thicket. They were, by the numbers, a mid-sized primate with no claws, no great speed, and no natural armor. And against lions, hyenas, saber-toothed cats, and eagles with a 2-meter wingspan, they had exactly one advantage worth anything at all. They could choose not to be noticed. This is where the investigation gets interesting, because silence turns out to be far more than the absence of noise. It's a behavior, and behaviors can be selected for, generation after generation, the same way a longer leg or a sharper tooth can be. Researchers studying predator-prey dynamics in primates have long noted that vigilance and quiet movement correlate directly with survival in high predation environments. Animals that freeze, that lower their voices, that scan before they move, simply outlive the ones that don't. Apply that pressure across 2 million years, and you are not just describing caution. You are describing a filter, quietly reshaping an entire species, and the body responded. The human ear evolved extraordinary sensitivity to the frequency range of a snapping branch, sitting almost exactly where a startled step or a shifting predator would register. Our eyes adapted for scanning motion at the edge of vision, the kind that catches a shape in the grass before the conscious mind even registers danger. Even something as ordinary as a whisper may carry a deeper history than we assume. Speech that can be produced almost without breath, pitched low, controlled. The acoustic signature of a species that spent longer being hunted than doing the hunting. Here is where the story turns from biology into something closer to culture. Silence wasn't only a survival tool for the body, it became a survival tool for the group. Ancestral humans who lived and slept together gained something no lone individual could manage alone. Someone else's ears, working while their own switched off. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies the Hadza of Tanzania, the Juhansi of the Kalahari, have observed exactly this pattern in living communities. Watches kept through the night, conversation dropping to near silence after dark, children hushed instinctively the moment the light fails. It isn't superstition, it's inherited memory, encoded in habit, rather than gene point 4 da. And this is where the obvious explanation quietly falls apart. We assume our ancestors feared the night because predators lurked in it, invisible, waiting to strike. But the deeper truth, when you follow the evidence, is almost the opposite. Predators like lions and leopards do most of their hunting by stalking, closing the distance slowly, sometimes over hours, long before the final rush. Sleeping humans were rarely killed in a moment of surprise. They were killed because they had already been noticed, tracked, and marked, long before darkness ever fell. The danger was never really in the silence of the night. It was in the silence of not knowing you had already been found. That single realization that threat could exist long before it was seen or heard, may be one of the most consequential insights our species ever stumbled into, because it changed what silence was for. It stopped being a passive shield against a wandering predator and became an active discipline. Listen constantly, speak sparingly, trust the ears of the group over the eyes of the individual. Fire helped eventually, pushing back the darkness and the animals that used it. But fire came late. Silence came first. It is worth pausing on what this really means. A 3-year-old child, dead for over 2 million years, and a scatter of tooth-marked bone in a South African cave tell us something no philosophy could. That the most human of all instincts, the hushed voice at the edge of a room, the reflex to go still when something feels wrong, the discomfort of an unexplained noise in the dark, did not begin as culture or manners. It began as the last line of defense for a small, soft-bodied primate with nothing else to rely on. We don't live under that pressure anymore. Most of us will never hear a branch snap and understand, in our bones, that it might be the last sound we ever hear. And yet the reflex remains, buried just beneath the surface of every quiet room we've ever gone still in. Somewhere in that instinct is the echo of every ancestor who survived simply by not being heard, and the ones, like the child from Taung, who weren't quite quiet, or quick, or lucky enough.